Every parent knows the weight of wanting to give their child a better life. When you're down to your last 50 and your 9-year-old son keeps asking when you'll find a real home again, you'll take any chance you can get. That's exactly where Jack Anderson found himself when he bid on a rotting cabin at a county auction. The morning sun streamed through the thin curtains of their cramped apartment, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Jack Anderson sat at the kitchen table, a cup of lukewarm coffee growing cold in his hands as he stared at the empty wallet beside his breakfast plate. Inside that leather billfold, cracked and faded from years of honest work, lay two $20 bills and a 10. $50, the sum total of what remained after rent, groceries, and keeping their 15-year-old Honda running long enough to get him to work and back. Maria's wedding ring sat in a small velvet box next to the wallet, catching the morning light with a gentle gleam that reminded him of her smile. He'd been carrying it with him for 3 months now, unable to bring himself to pawn it, but knowing the time was coming when he'd have no choice. The ring represented everything they'd built together, everything they'd lost when cancer took her 18 months ago, and everything he was failing to provide for their son, Lucas. 9-year-old Lucas sat across from him, methodically eating his cereal while sketching in a notebook he'd found at a garage sale. The boy had inherited his mother's artistic eye and his father's steady hands, creating elaborate drawings of houses with big yards, tree houses, and rooms where a person could spread out without bumping into walls. He drew what he dreamed of: space, permanence, a place that felt like home rather than a temporary stop between disappointments. But Mrs. Peterson says some kids at school are going camping this weekend. Real camping with tents and everything. Jack set down his coffee cup carefully, recognizing the careful way his son brought up things they couldn't afford. Lucas had learned not to ask directly for things, a survival skill no 9-year-old should need to develop. That sounds like fun, buddy. What kind of camping? The kind where you sleep outside and cook over a fire and don't have to hear Mr. Reynolds upstairs practicing his trumpet at midnight. Lucas's pencil moved across the paper, adding windows to a house that looked remarkably like the ones they'd drive past in the nicer neighborhoods across town. I told her we probably couldn't go because we don't have camping stuff. The weight of those words settled into Jack's chest like a stone. Lucas had stopped asking for things months ago, but he hadn't stopped wanting them. The camping trip, the baseball glove he'd admired in the sporting goods store, the bicycle with working brakes that would let him ride safely with the other kids. Lucas had learned to transform wishes into quiet observations, protecting his father from the pain of saying no. Jack worked as a mechanic at Brennan's Auto Repair, a job that barely covered their basic expenses, but allowed him the flexibility to pick Lucas up from school each day. Tom Brennan was a decent man who understood that single fathers sometimes needed to leave early for parent-teacher conferences or stay home with sick children. The pay wasn't much, but the understanding was worth more than money some days. Their apartment was a study in making do with less. The living room held a second-hand sofa that doubled as Jack's bed, a coffee table made from milk crates and a piece of wood, and a television that worked only if you held the antenna just right. Lucas's bedroom was barely large enough for a twin bed and a dresser, but the boy had made it his own, with drawings taped to the walls and a collection of interesting rocks arranged on the windowsill. Every morning, Jack would wake to the sound of Lucas getting himself ready for school, a level of independence that impressed and saddened him in equal measure. The boy would make his own lunch from whatever was available, pack his backpack without being reminded, and wait by the door for his father to drive him to school. At pickup time, Lucas would be waiting with a smile and stories about his day, carefully avoiding any mention of field trips, school supplies, or activities that cost money. In the evenings, they would work on homework together at the kitchen table. Lucas's math problems spread out next to Jack's bills and budgets. Sometimes Lucas would ask about his mother, and Jack would share stories about Maria's laugh, her terrible cooking, her way of making every small moment feel special. They would look through photo albums when the sadness felt manageable, remembering birthday parties and Christmas mornings when money hadn't been quite so tight and the future had seemed full of possibilities. The idea of buying property, any property, had seemed like an impossible dream until Jack heard about the county tax auction. Properties with unpaid taxes would be sold to the highest bidder, sometimes for remarkably small amounts. He'd driven by the courthouse several times, watching other people bid on land and buildings, wondering what it would feel like to own something, to have a place where no landlord could raise the rent or force them to move. On a whim, born of desperation and hope, he'd picked up the auction list from the county clerk's office. Most of the properties were far beyond his means, houses worth tens of thousands of dollars with back taxes in the thousands. But near the bottom of the list, he found it. A cabin on 2 acres of wooded land, back taxes of $50, minimum bid of $50. The property description was brief and not encouraging. Structure in severe disrepair, no utilities, connected access road in poor condition. But it was land, it was ownership. It was the possibility of giving Lucas a place to call home, a place where they could build something together instead of just surviving from month to month. That night, Lucas had found him studying the auction listing at the kitchen table. "What's that, Dad?" "Just something I'm thinking about, buddy. Remember how you were always drawing houses with big yards?" Lucas nodded, moving closer to look over his father's shoulder. "Well, there's this place. Just a cabin. Probably needs a lot of work, but it's got 2 whole acres of woods, trees to climb, space to run around, maybe even a place to build a treehouse." The hope that flickered in Lucas's eyes was almost painful to watch. Could we really buy it? Maybe. It's not much to look at now, but sometimes the most broken places hold the biggest possibilities. Lucas had spent the next 3 days drawing pictures of their cabin, imagining how they might fix it up, where they might plant a garden, how they might clear a space for a workshop where his dad could fix cars and he could build things. The drawings showed a place transformed by love and hard work, a place where a father and son could create something beautiful together. On the morning of the auction, Jack had dressed in his best shirt and clean boots, the 50 folded carefully in his wallet alongside Maria's ring. Lucas had wanted to come along, but Jack explained that auctions were serious business, boring for kids. The truth was, he couldn't bear to have Lucas witness his disappointment if someone else outbid him, or if the cabin turned out to be even worse than described. As they prepared to leave for school that morning, Lucas had given him a drawing of the two of them standing in front of a restored cabin, both of them smiling, a tire swing hanging from a massive oak tree. "For luck, Dad." Now sitting in his truck outside the courthouse, Jack unfolded that drawing and studied it again. In Lucas's imagination, they looked happy. They looked like they belonged somewhere. They looked like a family that had found their way home. The auction was scheduled to begin in 15 minutes. Around him, other bidders prepared for the day's business, investors with calculators and clipboards, contractors evaluating potential projects, families like his own, hoping for a miracle. He touched the $50 in his wallet and thought about the ring box in his pocket, the backup plan he prayed he wouldn't need. Sometimes, he thought, the biggest leap of faith happens not when you're strong enough to succeed, but when you're too desperate to give up. Today would be one of those days. The county courthouse steps buzzed with the quiet energy of people hoping to change their lives with a single bid. Jack found himself among a modest crowd of maybe 30 people, each clutching auction sheets and wearing expressions that ranged from confident calculation to desperate hope. He recognized his own expression in the latter group. The families and individuals who saw this auction not as an investment opportunity, but as their one chance at ownership. The auctioneer, a weathered man named Carl Hendress, who'd been conducting these sales for 15 years, climbed onto a makeshift platform with a portable microphone. His voice crackled to life, cutting through the morning air with the practiced rhythm of someone who understood that behind every bid was someone's dream or someone's last resort. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be starting with the commercial properties and working our way down to the residential and rural listings. Please have your bidder numbers ready, and remember that all sales are final, cash or certified check only. Jack's property was number 47 on a list of 52. He watched as houses, empty lots, and small commercial buildings went to investors with deep pockets and quick decisions. A gas station with environmental issues sold for $12,000. A house with foundation problems went for $8,000. Each successful bid represented someone's new beginning or business venture. but also reminded Jack how outclassed he was in this world of real estate speculation. As the morning wore on, his palms grew damp despite the cool October air. The 50 in his wallet felt increasingly inadequate as he listened to bids climb into the thousands. When they reached property number 40, he felt his heart begin to race. Number 41. Residential lot on Maple Street. Back taxes $850. Minimum bid $850. Number 42. Mobile home on leased land. Back taxes $600. Minimum bid $600. Each announcement brought him closer to the moment that would either change their lives or confirm that some dreams were simply too expensive for people like him. Number 47, Carl's voice announced, and Jack felt the ground seemed to shift beneath his feet. Rural property, 2.3 acres. Includes structure described as cabin. Back taxes $50. Minimum bid $50. A murmur rippled through the crowd. 50 was unusually low, even for a property in poor condition. Several bidders flipped through their sheets, trying to locate the listing they might have overlooked. This property is located on Pine Ridge Road, approximately 12 miles east of town. Access is via unpaved road, structure reported in severe disrepair with no utilities connected. Buyer responsible for any environmental or structural issues. Carl's description was thorough and discouraging. Do I have an opening bid of $50? Jack's hand trembled as he raised it. His bidder number 63 felt heavy in his grip. I have $50 from bidder 63. Do I have a $75? The seconds stretched like hours. Jack scanned the crowd, expecting someone to raise their hand to outbid him with casual ease. But the other bidders were consulting their papers, many shaking their heads. A cabin in severe disrepair with no utilities and difficult access wasn't attractive to most investors. 50 from bidder 63. Going once, going twice. Carl's gavel hovered in the air. $75, called a voice from the back. Jack's stomach dropped as he turned to see a man in a clean work shirt and new boots, someone who looked like he flipped houses for a living. Carl nodded. I have 70. Do I have $100? This was it. Jack had exactly 50. He couldn't go higher. His dream was about to end 25 hours short of success. He looked down at the drawing Lucas had given him that morning, the picture of them smiling in front of their cabin, and felt something break inside his chest. Then he remembered Maria's ring. His hand moved to his pocket, feeling the small velvet box. The ring was worth at least $300, maybe more. He could bid higher, win the property, and deal with pawning the ring afterward. But selling Maria's ring meant letting go of the last physical piece of their marriage, the last tangible connection to the woman who had made them a family. $100, he called out, his voice steadier than he felt. Carl's eyebrows rose slightly. I have $100 from bidder 63. Do I have $125? The house flipper was studying his auction sheet more carefully now, probably researching the property's potential. The silence stretched for 30 seconds, then a full minute. $100 from bidder 63, going once, going twice. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that seemed to echo off the courthouse walls. Sold to bidder 63 for $100. The applause that followed was polite and brief, the kind given to any successful transaction. But to Jack, it sounded like thunder. He stood frozen for a moment, unable to process that he had actually won something, that he was now a landowner, that he had just purchased Lucas's future for the price of a dinner at a decent restaurant. The next hour passed in a blur of paperwork, signatures, and the surreal process of handing over Maria's wedding ring as collateral while he arranged payment. The county clerk was patient and thorough, explaining his rights and responsibilities as the new owner, providing him with property maps and contact information for utility companies. Congratulations, Mr. Anderson, she said as she handed him the deed and a set of keys that looked like they'd been cut sometime in the 1980s. You're now the proud owner of 2.3 acres and whatever structures are on the property. The previous owner was a gentleman named Thomas Reynolds who lived there until the mid-1980s. Property's been abandoned since then. Jack stared at the keys, old tarnished brass with the kind of weight that suggested they'd opened many doors over many years. One appeared to be for the cabin itself, while the other was smaller, purpose unknown. The rusty keyring was simple and practical, the choice of someone who valued function over appearance. As he walked to his truck, deed and keys in hand, the reality of what he'd done began to settle in. He owned land. He owned a home, however broken it might be. He had given Lucas roots, a place that belonged to them, a foundation on which they could build whatever came next. But he'd also committed them to a project that might be beyond their means to complete. What if the cabin was truly uninhabitable? What if the cost of repairs exceeded what they could manage? What if he just spent their last $100 on a problem too big to solve? The drive to pick up Lucas from school passed in a haze of excitement and terror. When he saw his son waiting by the school entrance, backpack slung over one shoulder, and that careful smile that had learned not to expect too much, Jack felt his doubts dissolve into determination. Lucas climbed into the passenger seat and immediately noticed his father's expression. "Dad, you look different. What happened?" Jack held up the keys, watching Lucas's eyes widen as understanding dawned. "We got it, buddy. We got our cabin." The joy that spread across Lucas's face was worth every dollar, every doubt, every risk. For the first time in 18 months, his son looked like a child who believed in possibilities again. "Can we see it? Can we go there right now?" Jack looked at the clock on the dashboard, 3:30. They had maybe 3 hours of daylight left, enough time to drive out to their property and get their first look at what they'd bought. "Let's go home," Jack said. And for the first time since Maria died, the word home referred to something that actually belonged to them. The dirt road to their property turned out to be more of a suggestion than an actual road. Pine Ridge Road started as cracked asphalt at the main highway, transitioned to gravel after the first mile, and devolved into 2 tire tracks separated by a ridge of weeds and saplings for the final stretch. Jack's Honda bounced and scraped over roots and stones, the undercarriage protesting with the metallic complaints that made him wince. "This is like a real adventure," Lucas said, gripping his door handle as they navigated around a fallen branch. His excitement was infectious, transforming what could have been concerns about accessibility into the thrill of exploration. After 20 minutes of careful driving, the trees opened into a small clearing, and there it was, their cabin. Jack stopped the truck, and both of them sat in silence, taking in their first real look at what they'd bought. The structure stood like a forgotten memory in the center of the clearing, partially hidden by 20 years of aggressive vine growth. What had once been a modest log cabin now appeared to be wearing a green sweater of ivy, Virginia creeper, and wild grapevines that had claimed the walls, roof, and most of the windows. The front porch sagged at one corner where a support post had rotted through, and several roof shingles had surrendered to time and weather, leaving dark patches that promised leaks. But it was theirs. Lucas was the first to speak. "It's bigger than I thought it would be." Jack studied the structure with his mechanic's eye for problems and potential. The log walls appeared solid despite the vegetation, and the stone chimney stood straight and intact. The cabin was perhaps 24 feet wide and 30 feet deep, with what looked like a small addition on the back that might have been a bedroom or storage room. "What do you think, buddy? Still excited about our new home?" Lucas opened his door and stepped out, his sneakers crunching on fallen leaves and twigs. "It's perfect, Dad. It just needs some help." They approached the front porch cautiously, testing the floorboards before putting their full weight down. The wood was weathered gray but felt solid beneath their feet. Jack fitted the larger brass key into the front door lock, surprised when it turned easily despite its age. The door swung open with a groan of hinges that hadn't moved in years, revealing the interior of their cabin. Afternoon sunlight slanted through gaps in the vegetation covering the windows, creating a green-filtered twilight that made everything seem underwater. The main room was larger than their apartment's living room, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall and built-in shelves flanking it on both sides. The wooden floors were warped in places where rain had leaked through the roof, but they appeared to be solid hardwood beneath the dust and debris. A small kitchen occupied the back corner with cabinets that had weathered the years better than expected, and a window that would offer a view of the woods once the vines were cleared. "Look, Dad," Lucas said, pointing to the back of the main room. "There's stairs." A narrow staircase led to what must be a loft area, though the upper level was too dark to see clearly. To the right of the stairs, a doorway led to the addition they'd seen from outside. Lucas was already exploring, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. He peered into the back room and called out, "There's another bedroom back here, and it has its own window." Jack moved through the space slowly, mentally cataloging the work they'd need to do. Clear the vines, repair the roof, check the foundation, install electricity and plumbing. When he listed it that way, the project seemed overwhelming, but standing in the filtered light of their own cabin, breathing air that smelled of old wood and growing things, the work felt like possibility rather than burden. "Dad, come here," Lucas called from near the fireplace. He was kneeling beside the built-in shelves, running his hands along the wood grain. "Some of these boards are loose." Jack joined his son and examined the shelving. Sure enough, several of the shelf boards could be lifted out, revealing gaps where smaller items might have been stored. As Lucas lifted one of the longer boards, something crackled beneath it. "There's paper stuck under here," Lucas said, working the board free carefully. What emerged were several sheets of aged paper, yellowed at the edges and covered with handwriting in faded blue ink. The pages appeared to be journal entries dated from the mid-1980s and written in a careful, educated hand. Jack held the pages up to catch the filtered light coming through the windows and read the first entry aloud. "March 15, 1987. The work is nearly complete. 23 years of research, and I believe I have finally solved the fundamental problems that have plagued the field since Tesla's early experiments. The applications are extraordinary, but I fear the implications if this knowledge falls into the wrong hands. I have decided to document everything and secure it properly. If something happens to me, perhaps someday the right person will find it and understand what needs to be done." Lucas moved closer to his father as Jack continued reading. "The government men came by again today. They are persistent. These people who want to classify my work, to lock it away in some vault where it will benefit no one. They offer contracts and veiled threats in equal measure. I have told them nothing, but I know they will not give up easily. I am not a young man anymore, and I cannot run forever." The handwriting was that of someone educated and thoughtful, but there was an urgency in the later entries that suggested growing pressure. "Who do you think wrote this?" Lucas asked, peering over his father's shoulder at the intricate drawings. "Someone named Thomas," Jack said, remembering what the county clerk had told him. "Thomas Reynolds. He used to live here." They spent the next hour exploring the cabin more thoroughly, Lucas's excitement growing with each discovery. In the back bedroom, they found built-in drawers that still contained a few items: old clothing, a pair of reading glasses, a small toolkit that looked well used but carefully maintained. The loft area proved to be a single room with slanted ceilings and windows on both ends. It would make a perfect bedroom for Lucas, with views of the forest canopy and enough space for a desk where he could draw and do homework. As the afternoon sun began to slant lower through the trees, they sat on the front porch steps, sharing a package of crackers Jack had brought from the truck. The clearing around their cabin was larger than it had first appeared, with mature oak and maple trees providing a natural border. Through the trees, they could glimpse what might be a stream or creek. "So what do you think, Lucas? Is this the kind of place you imagined when you were drawing those pictures?" Lucas leaned against his father's shoulder, a gesture of contentment that had become rare since Maria's death. "It's better, Dad. In my drawings, it was just me and you, but this place feels like it has stories, like it's been waiting for us." Jack looked at the weathered pages in his hands, thinking about the man who had written those journal entries, who had lived in this cabin and worked on something important enough that people had pursued him for it. Thomas Reynolds had been alone here at the end, but he'd left traces of his life, fragments of his story that somehow made the cabin feel less abandoned and more like a home waiting to be reclaimed. As they drove back toward town in the gathering dusk, Lucas was already making plans for the cleanup work they could start that weekend. They would need basic tools, cleaning supplies, and tarps to cover areas where the roof was compromised. The work would be hard, but they would do it together. For the first time since Maria died, Jack felt like they were moving towards something, instead of just trying to survive each day. The cabin was broken, but it was theirs to fix. The work ahead was daunting, but it was work with purpose, work that would create something lasting for both of them. The weathered journal pages lay on the dashboard between them, Thomas Reynolds' words a reminder that their cabin held more than just shelter. It held secrets, stories, and perhaps the promise that even the most broken places could be transformed by the right hands and the right heart. Saturday morning arrived with the crisp promise of October, and Lucas was awake before dawn, his excitement about their first full day of work on the cabin making sleep impossible. Jack found him at the kitchen table, eating cereal while sketching detailed plans for clearing vines and organizing tools. "I figured out a system," Lucas announced as his father poured coffee. "We start with the front of the house so people can see we're making it nice, then work around to the sides and save the back for last, because nobody really sees that part anyway." Jack studied his son's drawing, impressed by the logical approach and attention to detail. "That's smart thinking, buddy. What about the inside? That's phase two," Lucas said with the seriousness of a project manager. "First, we make the outside look good. Then we work on making the inside livable." They loaded the Honda with every tool Jack owned, a modest collection of wrenches, screwdrivers, a hammer, work gloves, and a small stepladder. From their meager savings, he'd managed to buy a set of hedge trimmers, a tarp, and basic cleaning supplies. It wasn't much for a complete cabin restoration, but it was enough to begin. The drive out to Pine Ridge Road felt different in daylight, the forest around them alive with fall colors and the sounds of birds and small animals going about their morning routines. When they reached their clearing, the cabin looked more hopeful in the golden morning light, as if it were ready to shed its shroud of neglect and return to life. Lucas attacked the vine removal with the enthusiasm of someone half his age, carefully untangling Virginia creeper from around the front windows while Jack worked on the heavier growth covering the porch roof. The work was satisfying in a way that surprised them both. Each section of cleared wall revealed more of the cabin's original character, like uncovering a painting that had been hidden under layers of dust. "Dad, look at this," Lucas called from beside the front door. He had cleared enough vines to reveal a small wooden plaque mounted beside the entrance. The wood was weathered, but the carved letters were still readable. "Reynolds, 1962. "Thomas built this place himself," Jack said, running his fingers over the carved letters. He was 25 years old when he started. As they worked, they began to understand more about the man who had lived here. The cabin had been constructed with unusual attention to detail, joints fitted precisely, logs carefully selected and matched, windows positioned to capture maximum light while maintaining privacy. This wasn't a weekend retreat thrown together by amateurs. It was the careful work of someone who understood both craftsmanship and engineering. By noon, they had cleared the front wall completely, revealing windows that, while dirty and spiderwebbed, appeared to be intact and of surprisingly good quality. The afternoon was spent working on the interior, sweeping out years of leaves and debris, washing windows, and beginning to assess what needed repair versus what needed replacement. It was while cleaning the main room that Lucas made his next discovery. He had been working on the stone fireplace, using a brush to clear away years of soot and debris, when he noticed that one of the stones seemed different from the others. "This one's loose," he told his father, wiggling a stone about the size of a brick that sat at shoulder height on the left side of the fireplace. Jack examined the stone and found that it could be removed entirely, revealing a small cavity behind it. Inside the hollow space were more papers, not journal pages this time, but technical drawings rendered in precise detail with notes in the same careful handwriting they'd found under the floorboards. The first drawing showed what appeared to be an electrical circuit, but unlike anything Jack had seen in his years working on car electrical systems. The design was complex, with components labeled in technical terminology that was beyond his understanding. At the bottom of the page, in Thomas's methodical script, were the words Resonance Frequency Amplification System, Prototype 7. "What is it, Dad?" Lucas asked, peering over his father's shoulder at the intricate drawings. "I'm not sure. Some kind of electrical invention?" Your friend Thomas was apparently quite the engineer. The second drawing was even more complex, showing what looked like a three-dimensional structure with precise measurements in multiple cross-sections. This diagram was labeled Hybrid Solar Thermal Energy Converter, Final Design Specifications. As Jack studied the drawings, his mechanical mind began to recognize certain principles despite the advanced nature of the designs. These weren't random inventions or amateur experiments. They represented sophisticated engineering with practical applications that he could only begin to guess at. "There's more," Lucas said, reaching deeper into the cavity. He pulled out a small metal object wrapped in oiled cloth, a component that matched one of the elements shown in the circuit diagram. The piece was beautifully machined, with tolerances that spoke of professional precision and expensive equipment. He wasn't just designing these things, Jack said quietly. He was building them. They spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the cabin with new eyes, looking for other hidden compartments or storage areas. In the back bedroom, Lucas discovered that one of the built-in drawers had a false bottom, beneath which lay more circuit diagrams and what appeared to be a parts inventory list written in Thomas's careful hand. The list was extensive and technical. Copper wire, gauge 12 AWG, 500 Fe, ceramic capacitors, 0.1 MeV, 24 units, precision resistors, 1% tolerance, various values, ferrite core transformers, custom wound. Someone had invested serious money and time in acquiring specialized components. As evening approached and they prepared to head back to town, both father and son felt the weight of mystery settling around their new home. The cabin wasn't just an abandoned building. It was the workshop and laboratory of someone who had been working on inventions advanced enough to attract government attention. During the drive home, Lucas was uncharacteristically quiet, processing the implications of what they discovered. "Dad," he finally said as they reached the paved road, "do you think Mr. Thomas is still alive somewhere?" Jack considered the question carefully. The journal entries suggested that Thomas had been under pressure from government agents in 1987, nearly 40 years ago. The man would be quite elderly now, assuming he had survived whatever situation had forced him to abandon his home. "I don't know, buddy. The journal entries were from a long time ago, but I think maybe he left all those papers and drawings for someone like us to find." Someone like us? People who would appreciate the cabin, who would take care of it, and maybe understand that his work was important. As they pulled into the parking lot of their apartment complex, Lucas turned to look back in the direction they'd come from, toward the woods where their cabin waited in the darkness. "I think he picked us, Dad. I think somehow he knew we would be the ones to find his stuff and take care of his house." Jack looked at his son's serious expression and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October evening air. Because as impossible as it seemed, he was beginning to think Lucas might be right. For the next week, Lucas talked of nothing but the cabin and the mysterious Thomas Reynolds. Each evening after dinner, they would spread the technical drawings across their kitchen table, trying to make sense of the complex diagrams and cryptic notations. Jack had always been good with mechanical systems. It was what made him a successful auto mechanic. But these designs operated on principles beyond his training. "I wish I'd finished college," he told Lucas one night, as they studied a particularly complex circuit diagram. "Your mom always said I should go back and get my engineering degree." Lucas looked up from his own careful examination of the papers. "You still could, Dad. And maybe Mr. Thomas left instructions somewhere, like a teacher leaving lessons for us to find." Jack smiled at his son's optimism. The boy had a way of seeing possibilities where others saw only obstacles. "Maybe he did. We'll keep looking this weekend." At Brennan's Auto Repair, Jack found himself thinking about Thomas's designs even as he worked on transmissions and brake systems. There was something familiar about the principles at play in those resonance amplification circuits, something that reminded him of the electromagnetic systems in modern hybrid vehicles. Tom Brennan noticed his distraction during a particularly complicated transmission rebuild. "You're somewhere else today, Jack. Everything okay with you and Lucas?" Jack hesitated, unsure how much to share about their discoveries. "We bought a place, Tom. A cabin out on Pine Ridge Road. It needs a lot of work, but it's ours." Brennan's weathered face broke into a genuine smile. "Well, that's something. Didn't know you were looking to buy. Good for you, Jack. You and the boy need your own place." "There's something else," Jack added. "The cabin belonged to an inventor named Thomas Reynolds. We found some of his work hidden in the walls. Technical drawings, journals, things like that. I think he might have been working on some kind of advanced energy system." Brennan's expression shifted from congratulatory to thoughtful. "Reynolds. The name sounds familiar. Wait a minute." He disappeared into his cluttered office and returned with a yellowed newspaper clipping. "Thought I remembered something. This was in the paper back in '87 or '88. Guy named Reynolds who lived out in the woods." There was some controversy about his research. Jack examined the faded newsprint. The article was brief, describing Thomas Reynolds as a reclusive inventor who had worked for a defense contractor in the 1960s before retiring to pursue independent research. The controversy had involved a dispute with federal authorities over patents and classified information. The article ended with a cryptic statement. Reynolds' whereabouts are currently unknown, though associates suggest he may have relocated overseas to continue his work. He just disappeared, Jack murmured. Brennan nodded. That's how I remember it. There were rumors about government agents coming to town, looking for his research. Nothing ever came of it that I heard. People forgot about it after a while. Jack folded the clipping carefully and slipped it into his pocket. Mind if I keep this? It's yours. And Jack, be careful with whatever you found. Some secrets stay buried for a reason. By their third weekend at the cabin, Jack and Lucas had established a rhythm to their renovation work. Mornings were spent on exterior cleanup and repairs, clearing vines, patching the roof with materials salvaged from a construction site dumpster, rebuilding the sagging porch steps. Afternoons were dedicated to interior work and exploration, searching for more of Thomas's hidden caches while making the space more livable. Lucas had claimed the loft as his bedroom, sweeping away decades of dust and cobwebs to create a space that felt like his own. Jack would sleep in the main room until they could make the back bedroom habitable. We'll need to figure out electricity and plumbing before winter, Jack said as they shared sandwiches on the porch steps. I've been thinking about those solar panel diagrams we found. Maybe Thomas was working on a self-sufficient power system for the cabin. Lucas nodded enthusiastically. Like off-grid living? I read about that in a book at school. People use solar panels and wind turbines to make their own electricity. Exactly. And if Thomas was as smart as his design suggests, maybe he figured out something even better. Their conversation was interrupted by Lucas suddenly jumping to his feet. Dad, I almost forgot. I was going to clean out that crawl space under the floor today. Jack glanced at his watch. We've got a few hours of daylight left. Just be careful down there. Watch out for spiders and anything sharp. Lucas was already heading for the small access door on the side of the cabin, flashlight in hand. I'll be careful. Maybe I'll find another secret compartment. Jack smiled at his son's enthusiasm. Lucas had taken to their weekend explorations with the spirit of a born adventurer. The cabin renovation had awakened something in the boy that had been dormant since Maria's death, a sense of purpose and excitement about the future. Jack was sorting through salvaged building materials when Lucas's shout came from beneath the cabin. Dad, you have to see this. There's a whole box of stuff down here. Jack dropped what he was doing and hurried to the crawlspace access. Lying on his stomach, he peered into the dark space beneath the cabin, where Lucas's flashlight beam danced excitedly. Look what I found. It was wedged between the floor joists all the way in the corner. Jack crawled into the cramped space, his flashlight beam joining Lucas's to illuminate a metal-strong box that had been carefully hidden beneath the structure. The box was about the size of a small suitcase, made of heavy steel with a combination lock that looked both sturdy and old. Together, they worked the box free from its hiding place and dragged it out into the daylight. It was heavier than expected, suggesting it contained more than just papers. Once they had it on the porch, they examined it more closely. The metal was slightly corroded but intact, and whatever was inside had been protected from moisture and time. Should we try to open it? Lucas asked, his voice hushed with anticipation. Jack examined the combination lock. 3 wheels, numbers 0 through 9 on each. That meant 1,000 possible combinations, assuming they had to try them all. But something told him that Thomas Reynolds wouldn't have chosen a random number. Let's think about this logically, he said. If you were hiding something important, what numbers would you use for the combination? Lucas studied the box thoughtfully. Maybe his birthday or the year he built the cabin? They tried 1962, the year carved on the plaque by the front door. Nothing. They tried various combinations of numbers they'd seen in the journal entries. Still nothing. After several failed attempts, Jack sat back on his heels, puzzled. There must be a clue somewhere in what we've already found. Lucas was already sifting through the technical drawings they'd collected. Dad, what about these numbers here? In the corner of this diagram? In the corner of the first circuit diagram, almost too small to notice, were the numbers 743 written in pencil. It seemed oddly placed, not connected to any component measurement or calculation. Worth a try, Jack said, reaching for the lock. He carefully aligned the wheels to read 743, then pulled on the latch. The lock opened with 3 satisfying clicks. Lucas's eyes widened. You did it. No, buddy, you did it. Good eye spotting those numbers. They opened the lids slowly, uncertain what they might find inside. The box had been carefully packed, its contents wrapped in waterproof plastic and organized with military precision. Jack removed the items one by one, laying them out on the porch floor. Inside the box, wrapped in waterproof plastic, were treasures that made their previous discoveries seem like previews of a much larger story. The first item was a hand-drawn map of their property, but far more detailed than anything the county had provided. This map showed not just the boundaries of their 2 acres, but topographical features, underground water sources, and several locations marked with cryptic symbols. Beneath the map were more technical drawings, but these were different from what they'd found before. These diagrams showed complete systems rather than individual components, with notations that suggested working prototypes had been built and tested. Most intriguing of all was a vintage compass, not the plastic kind used for camping, but a precision instrument made of brass and steel with a weighted needle that moved smoothly and accurately despite its apparent age. The compass was engraved with the initials TR and a date, 1965. "This is beautiful," Lucas said, turning the compass in his hands and watching the needle adjust to magnetic north. "It's like something from a pirate movie." Jack was studying the map, comparing the symbols marked on it to their actual surroundings. One symbol, located about 50 yards behind the cabin near what the map indicated was a natural spring, caught his attention. It looked like a combination of geometric shapes that didn't match any standard surveying notation he had ever seen. "What do you think these marks mean?" he asked, showing Lucas the various symbols scattered across the map. Lucas examined the markings with the intense concentration he usually reserved for his artwork. "They look like a treasure map, like someone buried things in different places around our property." The more Jack studied the map, the more he had to agree with his son's assessment. The symbols weren't random. They appeared to be deliberately placed to mark specific locations, and several of them had numbers beside them that might indicate some kind of sequence or priority. There was one more item in the box, a small leather journal, its pages filled with Thomas's handwriting. Unlike the technical entries they'd found before, these were more personal reflections, documenting his thoughts as he developed his inventions. One entry stood out. April 4th, 1983. "The hybrid energy system passed all tests today. Full integration of solar, thermal, and resonance amplification components achieves stable output at 400% efficiency compared to conventional systems. This is the breakthrough I've been working toward for 2 decades. With this technology, a single household could generate enough clean energy to be completely self-sufficient with minimal environmental impact. The implications for remote communities are enormous, but I fear what some might do with this knowledge. There are always those who would weaponize progress or monopolize it for profit. I must be careful about documentation and storage. The markers are in place. The plans are secured. If the right person finds this work, they will understand what to do with it then." Jack read the entry aloud to Lucas, whose face lit up with excitement. "Dad, he invented some super efficient energy system, and he hid the plans around our property." "It certainly looks that way," Jack agreed. "But why hide everything instead of patenting it? And why was the government so interested?" He flipped forward a few pages in the journal and found a possible answer. June 18th, 1986. Another visit from the Energy Department representatives today. Their offers grow more insistent, their threats more thinly veiled. They speak of national security and classified research, but their eyes betray their true interests. They see weapons where I see liberation from fossil fuels. They see military applications where I see villages with clean power. I cannot allow my life's work to be perverted in this way. I have begun preparations to secure everything. The property will likely be seized for back taxes eventually. I can only hope that whoever finds it will be worthy of the trust I am placing in them. Armed with the compass and map, they spent the remainder of the afternoon exploring areas of their property they hadn't yet investigated. The land was more varied than they'd realized, with rolling hills, a year-round creek, and several natural clearings that would be perfect for gardens or workshop space. The symbol marked closest to the cabin led them to what appeared to be a natural spring feeding into their creek. The water ran clear and cold, forming a small pool before continuing downstream. But it was what they found near the spring that made them both stop and stare. Partially hidden by ferns and fallen logs was a concrete structure about the size of a large grave marker, but clearly man-made and purposeful. The concrete was weathered but intact, and set into its top surface was a metal plate with another symbol etched into it, the same symbol that appeared on their map. "It's like a marker," Lucas said, kneeling beside the concrete structure. "Like Thomas left signs for people to follow." Jack examined the metal plate more closely and discovered that it wasn't just decorative. It could be rotated like a dial. When he turned it clockwise, it clicked into different positions, each click aligning the etched symbol with one of several small notches cut into the concrete around its edge. "Dad, look at this," Lucas called from a few feet away. He had been exploring around the spring and found another metal object partially buried in the soft earth near the water's edge. A small cylindrical device about the size of a flashlight, made of the same kind of precision machined metal they'd found in the fireplace. The cylinder was heavier than it looked, with one end that could be unscrewed to reveal complex internal components. Unlike the simple elegance of the compass, this device looked unmistakably modern, even futuristic, despite being buried for who knew how many years. "What do you think it does?" Lucas asked. Jack turned the device in his hands, noting the quality of the machining and the unusual design of the internal components. Whatever it was, it represented significant engineering expertise and expensive materials. "I think," he said slowly, "we're beginning to understand that your friend Thomas wasn't just an inventor. He was an inventor who built things that worked." As afternoon shifted toward evening, they marked the location of the spring and the concrete structure on their own copy of Thomas's map, starting what Lucas insisted on calling their treasure inventory. The original map showed at least 6 other symbols scattered around their property, each potentially marking another cache or clue left by their mysterious predecessor. Walking back toward the cabin through the lengthening shadows, both father and son were quiet, processing the implications of what they'd found. The metal cylinder weighed heavy in Jack's pocket, a reminder that their simple renovation project was evolving into something much more complex and potentially significant. "Dad," Lucas said as they approached their cabin, "do you think we should tell anyone about this stuff?" It was a question Jack had been asking himself all afternoon. The journal entries suggested that Thomas had been hiding from people who wanted to control his work. If those same people or their successors were still around, revealing Thomas's secrets might bring unwanted attention to their quiet property and their simple dream of building a home together. "I think," Jack said carefully, "that for now this should be our secret. Thomas trusted someone to find his work and take care of it. Maybe that someone is us." Lucas nodded solemnly, understanding the weight of the responsibility they'd inherited along with their property. As they prepared to head back to town, Jack took one last look at their cabin, now partially cleared of vines and looking more like a home with each weekend's work. But it was also becoming something else, a repository of secrets, a testament to one man's lifetime of innovation, and perhaps the key to understanding something far more valuable than either of them had imagined when they'd made that desperate bid at the county auction. The compass in Lucas's pocket pointed steadily north, but Jack had the feeling their true direction was still being determined by forces they didn't yet understand. The fourth weekend at the cabin dawned clear and cool, with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes every color more vivid, every sound more distinct. Jack and Lucas arrived early, eager to continue their exploration of the mysterious markers on Thomas's map. They had spent the week studying the map, planning a systematic approach to visit each location. "Today's going to be different, Dad," Lucas said as they unloaded their supplies. "We're not just fixing the cabin, we're treasure hunters." Jack smiled at his son's enthusiasm. The boy had made a special belt pouch for Thomas's brass compass, and he wore it proudly at his waist like an explorer from another century. "That's right, buddy. But remember, we're looking for knowledge, not gold. Whatever Thomas hid out there, he meant it to help people, not make someone rich." Lucas nodded solemnly. "I know. It's like a responsibility. He trusted whoever found his cabin to use his inventions the right way." They spread the map across the hood of the Honda, the brass compass beside it catching the morning sunlight. Jack had marked the locations they'd already explored, the cabin itself and the concrete marker by the spring. 6 more symbols remained scattered across their property, each one potentially holding another piece of Thomas's technological puzzle. Let's start with this one, Jack said, pointing to a symbol on the eastern edge of their land. According to the map, it's on a ridge overlooking the valley. Might give us a good view of the whole property too. Lucas studied the symbol, a starburst pattern with 8 points. That's the farthest one from the cabin. Why start there? Jack tapped his finger on the map. Look at the numbers beside each symbol. This one is marked with a 1. I'm thinking Thomas numbered these in the order he wanted someone to find them. You mean like a sequence? Lucas asked, his face lighting up with understanding. Like each one gives you information you need for the next one? Exactly. And if we're right, this is where he meant us to begin. Armed with the compass, map, and backpacks containing water, sandwiches, and basic tools, they set off through the autumn woods. The terrain grew steeper as they moved east, forcing them to navigate around fallen trees and rocky outcroppings. Lucas led the way, checking the compass frequently and matching landmarks to the topographical features on the map. As they climbed, Jack was impressed by his son's natural ability to navigate. The boy moved through the forest with growing confidence, reading the land and following the compass bearings with precision that belied his 9 years. Dad, I think we're getting close, Lucas called back. The compass needle is acting weird when I point it toward that big rock formation. Jack caught up to his son and examined the compass. Sure enough, the needle wavered and trembled when pointed at a granite outcropping ahead of them, as if pulled by some magnetic force other than north. That's not normal, Jack said, frowning. Something must be affecting the magnetic field. As they approached the rock formation, they discovered it wasn't a natural feature at all, but a carefully constructed cairn of stones, weathered by decades of exposure but unmistakably man-made. Set into the center of the cairn was a metal plate identical to the one they'd found by the spring, but engraved with the 8-pointed starburst from their map. It's another marker, Lucas said excitedly, just like on the map. Jack examined the metal plate, noting that, like the previous one, it could be rotated. When he turned it, it clicked into different positions, each one aligning the starburst pattern with notches cut into the surrounding stone. What happens if we turn it to point north? Lucas suggested. Jack aligned the starburst with the north notch, and they both jumped back in surprise as a section of the cairn slid aside, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a metal tube, sealed against the elements, containing rolled papers and a smaller metal container. Jack carefully extracted the contents, spreading the papers on a flat section of rock. The first document was a detailed schematic of what appeared to be a solar collection system, but unlike any conventional design. The panels were arranged in a pattern that resembled the 8-pointed starburst on the marker, with notes indicating optimal positioning for different seasons and sun angles. It looks like some kind of super-efficient solar array, Jack said, studying the technical drawings. But these measurements, if I'm reading this right, Thomas was claiming an efficiency rate nearly 3 times what modern panels can achieve. Lucas was examining the smaller metal container, which had opened to reveal a set of photovoltaic cells, but with a strange crystalline structure embedded in their surface. Are these solar cells, Dad? They look different from the ones on our school's roof. Jack took one of the cells, holding it up to the sunlight. The crystal structure caught the light in unexpected ways, refracting it in patterns that suggested advanced optical engineering. These aren't just solar cells. They're some kind of hybrid technology. See how the crystals are arranged? They're designed to capture wavelengths of light that normal panels would miss. There's a note too, Lucas said, pulling out a folded paper from beneath the cells. In Thomas's now familiar handwriting was a brief message. To the finder, what you hold is the first component of an integrated energy system. These photovoltaic cells incorporate rare earth elements and custom crystal matrices to achieve 78% conversion efficiency across the full solar spectrum, including infrared and ultraviolet ranges. The remaining markers will guide you to the other components. Follow in sequence. Jack whistled softly. 78% efficiency. That's impossible by current standards. Most commercial panels are around 20 to 25% efficient. Is that good? Lucas asked. Good. It's revolutionary. If these cells work as described, they could generate 3 to 4 times more power from the same amount of sunlight as the best modern panels. They carefully repacked the cells and documents, marking the location on their map. As they descended the ridge, Jack's mind raced with implications. The technology in that simple metal tube represented a breakthrough that major energy companies had spent billions trying to achieve. And it was just the first of 7 markers. The second marker, located near the creek that ran through their property, yielded another surprise. This time, the hidden cache contained detailed plans for a micro-hydroelectric system that could generate consistent power from even small water flows. Unlike conventional designs that required significant water pressure or volume, Thomas's system used principles of vortex dynamics to amplify the energy potential of modest streams. The third marker, found beneath a distinctive lightning-scarred oak tree, revealed components of an advanced energy storage system. Not batteries in the conventional sense, but a complex arrangement of supercapacitors and what Thomas called resonance chambers that could store and release energy with minimal loss. With each discovery, the picture grew clearer. Thomas Reynolds hadn't just been tinkering with existing technology. He'd been developing an integrated energy system decades ahead of its time, one that could harness multiple renewable sources and store the resulting power with unprecedented efficiency. By late afternoon, they had located 4 of the 7 markers, each one yielding another piece of Thomas's master design. They were heading toward the 5th location when Lucas stopped suddenly, pointing at a structure barely visible through the trees. "Dad, what's that building? It's not on the map." Jack squinted in the direction his son was indicating. About 50 yards away stood what appeared to be a small shed or outbuilding, its weathered boards nearly the same gray-brown as the surrounding forest. "I don't know, buddy. It might be another structure that came with the property." The clerk didn't mention anything besides the main cabin. They approached cautiously. The building was approximately 10 feet square, with a slanted roof and no windows. A padlock secured the door, corroded by decades of exposure but still intact. "Do you think the key we found might fit this?" Lucas asked, referring to the second key that had come with their property deed, the smaller one whose purpose had remained unknown. Jack examined the padlock. "It's worth a try." He removed the key from his pocket and inserted it into the lock. It turned with surprising ease, as if the mechanism had been recently oiled and maintained. The door swung open to reveal a simple storage shed containing garden tools, maintenance equipment, and several metal shelves holding various supplies. But something about the dimensions troubled Jack's mechanical mind. "Lucas, does this space seem smaller inside than outside to you?" Lucas looked around, considering. "Yeah, it does. It should be bigger on the inside based on how big it looks from outside." Jack ran his hands along the back wall, studying the construction. The woodwork was expertly done, with precisely fitted boards and careful joinery. But one section of the wall didn't match the rest. The grain pattern was slightly different, the boards newer by perhaps a decade. He pressed experimentally against different spots on the wall. When his hand met a particular knot in the wood, he felt something give slightly. "I think there's a hidden door or panel here," he said, applying more pressure. With a click and the whisper of well-balanced hinges, a section of the wall swung inward, revealing darkness beyond. Lucas's eyes widened. A secret door. Jack pulled out his flashlight and shone it through the opening. What they saw made them both gasp. Beyond the false wall lay a steep staircase, descending into what appeared to be an underground chamber. Metal railings lined the stairs, and at the bottom they could see the dim outlines of electronic equipment. "It's an underground room," Jack whispered. "Thomas built an entire hidden laboratory beneath this shed." "Should we go down?" Lucas asked, his voice a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Jack hesitated. The hidden lab clearly represented the heart of Thomas's work, the place where his inventions had moved from theory to reality. But there was no telling what condition it might be in after decades of abandonment, or what hazards might await them. "Let me go first," he decided. "Stay close behind me, and if I tell you to go back, you do it immediately. Understand?" Lucas nodded solemnly. They descended the stairs carefully, their flashlight beams probing the darkness. At the bottom, Jack's hand found a switch on the wall. With nothing to lose, he flipped it. To their astonishment, lights flickered on, illuminating a space that seemed to belong to another world, or another time. The underground laboratory was approximately 30 feet square, with concrete walls reinforced by steel beams. Workbenches lined 3 sides covered with electronic equipment, precision tools, and partially assembled devices. In the center of the room stood a larger construction, a circular platform surrounded by what appeared to be power conduits and monitoring equipment. But the most shocking aspect wasn't the laboratory itself, it was the condition. Unlike the abandoned cabin above, this space showed no signs of decades-long neglect. The floors were clean, the equipment dust-free, the air surprisingly fresh and circulated. "Someone's been here," Jack said quietly. "Recently." Lucas moved to one of the workbenches, examining a complex device that hummed softly. "Dad, this is running. It's actually turned on." Jack joined his son, studying the equipment. The device appeared to be a monitoring system of some kind, with digital readouts showing power levels, temperatures, and other measurements. A small green light pulsed steadily in one corner. "It's not just running," Jack realized. "It's been maintained. The question is, by whom?" They moved through the laboratory cautiously, taking in the remarkable array of technology. One section was dedicated to what appeared to be solar energy research, with modified photovoltaic cells similar to those they'd found at the first marker, but in various stages of refinement. Another area held hydroelectric equipment that matched the designs from their second cache, including a working model of the vortex generator. A third workspace contained energy storage components, the supercapacitors and resonance chambers from the third marker. "This is where he built everything," Lucas said with awe. "All the stuff from the markers. It all came from here." Jack nodded, his attention drawn to a desk in the corner. Unlike the technical workspaces, this area was personal, containing notebooks, reference materials, and framed photographs. He picked up one of the photos, showing a younger Thomas Reynolds in military uniform, standing beside what appeared to be an early prototype of his energy system. A notebook lay open on the desk, the handwriting unmistakably Thomas's, but the ink was fresh, the entry dated just 1 week earlier. "The new owners continue to surprise me. Their methodical approach to the markers shows intelligence and respect for the work. The boy especially demonstrates remarkable intuition. Finding the combination to the strong box was impressive. They are proceeding exactly as I hoped. Soon it will be time to make contact." Jack's blood ran cold. "Lucas, Thomas Reynolds is alive, and he's been watching us. But that would make him really old," Lucas said, frowning. "In his late 80s at least," Jack agreed. "But this entry is dated last week, and this laboratory has been maintained for decades. Someone has been taking care of this place all along." A larger technical manual on the desk caught Jack's attention. Unlike the individual component designs they'd found at the markers, this document appeared to be a comprehensive guide to Thomas's complete energy system. The title page read, "Integrated Renewable Energy Amplification System, Technical Specifications and Construction Guidelines." Below the title was a brief introduction. "This manual details the complete ARIAS technology, capable of providing sustainable, clean energy at scales ranging from single households to small communities. By integrating solar, hydro, geothermal, and ambient thermal collection with advanced storage and distribution systems, ARIAS achieves overall system efficiency of 92% with zero environmental impact. The technology represents 30 years of independent research and development, free from corporate or government control." Jack flipped through the pages, his mechanical mind struggling to process the sophistication of what he was seeing. The individual components they discovered were impressive enough, but the integrated system described in the manual was revolutionary, a complete reinvention of how energy could be generated, stored, and distributed. "Dad, look at this," Lucas called from another workbench. The boy had found a scale model of what appeared to be their cabin and the surrounding property, but transformed. In the model, the cabin had been fully restored, with subtle solar collectors integrated into the roof design. A small water wheel was positioned on the creek, and throughout the property, other collection devices were strategically placed to harvest energy from multiple sources. Most striking was a central unit behind the cabin, a sleek, unobtrusive structure that appeared to be the heart of the system, where all the collected energy would be processed and stored. "It's a plan for our property," Lucas said. "It shows how the whole system could be installed to power the cabin." And not just the cabin, Jack realized. According to these specifications, This system could generate enough power for at least 10 households. As they continued exploring, a drawer in the desk yielded another surprise. A thick folder containing legal documents, government correspondence, and what appeared to be threatening letters from a corporation called Enercorp. The earliest documents dated from the 1970s, when Thomas had first begun patenting components of his system. The correspondence showed a pattern: initial interest from energy companies and government agencies, followed by pressure to sell exclusive rights, culminating in increasingly hostile actions when Thomas refused to relinquish control of his inventions. A letter from Enercorp's CEO, dated 1985, was particularly revealing. Dr. Reynolds, our final offer stands at $2.5 million for exclusive rights to your energy amplification technology. While generous, this offer expires in 30 days. Should you decline, be advised that our legal department has identified several areas where your work potentially infringes on our existing patents. Additionally, we have brought your research to the attention of certain government agencies who may have interest in classifying this technology on national security grounds. I strongly suggest you reconsider your position on this matter. Cooperation would be beneficial to all parties involved. Beneath this letter was Thomas's draft response: never sent. What you fail to understand is that this technology was never developed for profit or power. It was created to solve the fundamental problem of clean, accessible energy for all people. Your threats merely confirm that I have made the right decision in declining your offers. I have taken steps to ensure this work will eventually reach those who will use it as intended, regardless of your interference. The final document in the folder was a court order dated 1987, declaring Thomas's research to be classified material relevant to national security interests and demanding the surrender of all prototypes, documentation, and research materials to federal authorities. Thomas knew they were coming for everything, Jack said, understanding now why the inventor had hidden his work so carefully. He didn't just disappear, he went underground, literally, and he's been here all along, waiting for the right people to find what he hid. A soft click from behind made them both turn. Standing at the base of the stairs was an elderly man with white hair and alert blue eyes, watching them with an expression of quiet satisfaction. Despite his age, easily in his late 80s, he stood straight and moved with deliberate precision. "You've done well to find this place," he said, his voice stronger than his years might suggest. "Better than I could have hoped, actually. You've followed the markers in sequence, treated the technology with respect, and demonstrated remarkable problem-solving skills." He stepped forward, extending his hand. "Thomas Reynolds, and you must be Jack and Lucas Anderson. Welcome to my real workshop." Lucas stared in open amazement. "How do you know our names?" Thomas smiled. "I've been watching your progress since the auction. I arranged for that property to be available precisely when you needed it, Jack. The back taxes, the minimum bid, all designed to ensure someone like you could acquire it." Jack's mind reeled with questions. "You've been watching us?" "How?" Discreetly, Thomas assured him. "Nothing invasive. I simply needed to be certain the right person found my work. When I saw how carefully you studied those first journal pages, how respectfully you handled the technical drawings, I knew I'd chosen correctly." He gestured around the laboratory. "This represents my life's work, technology that could transform how we generate and use energy. But more importantly, it represents a choice about who controls that transformation. The big energy conglomerates want exclusive ownership. The military sees weapons potential. I see a way to provide clean, affordable power to everyone, regardless of wealth or geography." "But why us?" Jack asked. "Why not choose someone with the resources or connections to develop this properly?" Thomas moved to the scale model Lucas had found. "Because people with resources and connections are precisely the ones who would be corrupted by this technology's potential. I needed someone honest, someone practical, someone who understands the value of building something that lasts." He looked directly at Jack. "A skilled mechanic who can fix what's broken, a father teaching his son to build rather than just consume. Someone who would see this technology for what it truly is, not a path to wealth, but a tool for helping others." His gaze shifted to Lucas, "And a boy with the curiosity and imagination to see possibilities where others see only problems. Together, you represent exactly the kind of stewardship I've been hoping to find." Jack struggled to process the implications. But I don't have the scientific background to understand in all of this, let alone develop it further or protect it from people who might want to take it. Thomas smiled again. You understand more than you think. Your mechanical intuition has already helped you grasp concepts that took me years to develop. And as for protection, he moved to another desk and retrieved a leather portfolio. I've made certain arrangements over the decades, legal structures, financial resources, connections with people who share my vision. All of this is detailed here, along with formal transfer documents that would make you the legal owner of everything I've created. Jack stared at the portfolio. You want to give us your technology? Just like that? Not just like that, Thomas corrected. I've been watching you for months, even before the auction. I know about your struggle since Maria's death. I know about your integrity at work, your dedication to Lucas. I know you're someone who fixes things because they should work properly, not just to be paid. You're exactly the person that I've been waiting for. Lucas looked up at the old inventor. How long have you been hiding here, Mr. Thomas? Thomas's expression softened. A long time, young man. Since before your father was born, living quietly, refining my work, waiting for the right moment. The world is finally ready for this technology now, in a way it wasn't when I first developed it. The climate crisis has made renewable energy a necessity, not just an alternative. He turned to Jack again. I'm offering you more than just technology. I've established a foundation with assets of approximately $5 million, dedicated to developing and implementing these energy systems. The foundation would be yours to direct, with the understanding that the primary mission is to bring this technology to communities that need it most. Jack felt overwhelmed. $5 million? I can't possibly. Thomas raised a hand to interrupt. The money is merely a tool, not the point. The point is the technology and what it can do. Think of remote villages without reliable electricity. Think of communities devastated by natural disasters. Think of people struggling to pay utility bills while corporations post record profits. This technology could change all of that. He gestured around the laboratory. But I'm 87 years old. I need someone younger, someone with the energy and vision to carry this forward. Someone who understands that true value isn't measured in dollars. His eyes met Jack's. I think that someone is you, Jack Anderson. You and your son. The laboratory fell silent except for the soft hum of equipment. Jack looked at Lucas, whose face showed a mixture of excitement and understanding beyond his years. Then he looked back at Thomas Reynolds, the reclusive genius who had somehow chosen them for this extraordinary responsibility. Can we think about this? Jack asked. It's a lot to process, Thomas nodded. Of course, take the technical manual with you. Study it. Discuss it between yourselves. I've waited decades. I can wait a little longer for your decision. As they prepared to leave, Thomas handed Jack a small device that resembled a key fob. This will grant you access to the laboratory anytime. The security system will recognize you now. Come back when you are ready to talk further. Jack accepted the device, still struggling to comprehend the magnitude of what they'd discovered and what they'd been offered. One thing before you go, Thomas added, you should know that Enercorp is still very much in business and still very interested in acquiring my technology. They have resources and influence I can't match. If you accept my offer, you'll need to be careful. They have ways of discovering things they shouldn't know about. Jack nodded solemnly. We'll be discreet. And thank you for trusting us with this. As they climbed the stairs back to the shed, Lucas turned to Thomas. Mr. Thomas, did you really arrange for us to get the cabin? How could you know we'd even be at the auction? The old inventor smiled enigmatically. Sometimes, Lucas, the right people appear exactly when they're needed most. I simply made sure the opportunity would be there when you arrived. The drive back to their apartment that evening was unusually quiet. Both father and son were absorbed in their thoughts, trying to process the extraordinary encounter and the decision that lay before them. Jack's mind raced with practical considerations: the responsibility of managing a $5 million foundation, the technical challenges of developing Thomas's technology, the potential threats from corporations like Enercorp. But beneath these concerns lay a growing sense of purpose unlike anything he'd felt since Maria's death. Lucas broke the silence as they approached the city limits. Dad, I think we should do it. I think we should help Mr. Thomas. Jack glanced at his son. It's a huge responsibility, buddy. and potentially dangerous, if what Thomas said about Enercorp is true. Lucas nodded solemnly. I know, but that's why he needs us. His inventions could help so many people, and he's been waiting a really long time for someone he can trust. Jack couldn't help but smile at his son's simple clarity. When did you get so wise? Lucas shrugged. Mom always said that when you can help someone, you should. Remember? Jack did remember. It had been one of Maria's core beliefs that opportunities to make a difference should never be ignored, no matter how challenging they might seem. She'd be proud of you for thinking that way, he said softly. As they pulled into their apartment complex, Jack had already made his decision. The technical manual Thomas had given them lay on the seat between them, hundreds of pages detailing a technology that could transform lives around the world. The cabin they'd purchased for a hunt had led them to something far more valuable than property or even money. It had led them to purpose. Tomorrow, they would return to the laboratory and accept Thomas's offer. Together, the mechanic, the boy, and the aging inventor would embark on a journey none of them could have imagined just weeks earlier. A journey that began with a desperate bid at a county auction and led to the possibility of changing the world. Toi hiu vasa morong fane de dat du sonen tu nyu yuko, dambao bao fu tukakak yuto to outline. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cabin clearing as Jack and Lucas made their way back to Thomas's hidden laboratory. They had spent the night discussing the extraordinary offer, weighing the responsibilities against the potential to make a real difference in the world. By dawn, their decision was made. The secret door in the shed opened smoothly at the touch of Jack's new access device. As they descended the stairs, they found Thomas at a workbench, carefully adjusting a component of his energy system. He looked up with a smile that suggested he already knew their answer. You've decided, he said simply. Jack nodded. We want to help. We want to continue what you've started. Thomas's weathered face broke into a genuine smile. I knew you would. There's something about the two of you, a fundamental decency that's become rare in this world. He gestured for them to join him at the central desk, where legal documents had been arranged in neat stacks. I've prepared everything: transfer of intellectual property, establishment of the Reynolds Foundation for Sustainable Energy, financial accounts, and introduction letters to my few trusted contacts in the renewable energy field. Lucas looked up at the old inventor. So we'll be making clean energy for people who can't afford regular electricity? Thomas nodded. That's the core mission. To provide energy independence to communities that have been overlooked or exploited by conventional power companies. Starting small with individual households and remote villages, then expanding as the technology proves itself. Jack examined the foundation documents, noting the careful legal framework Thomas had constructed over decades. You've thought of everything, but I'm still not clear on why you're willing to hand all this over to us. This is your life's work. Thomas's expression grew solemn. I'm 87 years old, Jack. I don't have the time left to see this through to completion. What I need now isn't ownership. It's the assurance that this technology will be used as intended to help those who need it most. He placed a hand on the foundation charter. And yes, I've tried to think of everything. The legal structure makes the technology essentially unpatentable by anyone else. The Foundation's charter requires that the core technology remains open source, while still protecting it from weaponization or monopolization. The financial resources are structured to be self-sustaining through limited commercial applications that fund the humanitarian work. The legal transfer, however, proved far more complex than any of them had anticipated. Thomas had arranged for Margaret Chen, a specialized attorney in intellectual property law, to oversee the process. When she arrived the following day, her expression was grave as she spread documents across the laboratory's conference table. Mr. Anderson, she began, I need you to understand that this isn't simply signing a few papers. The transfer we're undertaking has implications that reach far beyond normal property or patent rights. Jack nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle more firmly on his shoulders. I understand, or at least I'm beginning to. Margaret gestured to the stacks of documents. We're dealing with multiple layers of legal protection. Thomas has spent decades creating a structure that would shield his work from corporate or government seizure. Some patents were deliberately filed with key components omitted. Others were divided between different countries and jurisdictions. There are shell companies, blind trusts, and defensive publications designed to prevent anyone from monopolizing this technology. For the next 8 hours, they worked through the intricate legal maze Thomas had constructed. Each document required careful explanation, each signature transferring another piece of his life's work to Jack's guardianship. This approach, Margaret explained, pointing to a particularly complex set of documents, creates a legal firewall. If Enercorp or any other entity attempts to claim ownership through one channel, they'll find themselves blocked by protections in another jurisdiction. Lucas watched in fascination as the adults navigated the complicated legal terrain. Though only 9, he seemed to grasp the importance of what was happening. "It's like a puzzle," he said during a brief break. "Mr. Thomas made a puzzle that only the right person could solve." Thomas smiled at the boy. "That's exactly right, Lucas. The law can be a weapon or a shield depending on how it's used. I've tried to make it a shield for this technology. The complexity of the transfer wasn't limited to intellectual property. The financial aspects required equal attention. The Reynolds Foundation's assets were distributed across multiple accounts and investment vehicles, structured to be both secure and accessible for humanitarian purposes. This account," Margaret explained, showing Jack the relevant documentation, "is dedicated to research and development. This one supports implementation in developing regions, and this one is specifically for emergency contingencies." Jack was overwhelmed by the scope of the Foundation's resources. The $5 million he'd been told about was only the beginning. There were research facilities in 3 countries, fabrication partnerships with specialized manufacturers, and training programs that had been quietly preparing technicians for years. "Why so distributed?" Jack asked. "Wouldn't it be more efficient to centralize?" Thomas shook his head. "Centralization creates vulnerability. If Enercorp or similar entities targeted one aspect of our operation, the entire mission could be compromised. Distributed resources mean distributed resilience." By evening, the process was complete. Jack's hand was cramped from signing hundreds of documents, but the transfer was legally binding. Thomas handed him a small safe deposit box key. "The final piece," he said. "This opens box 743 at First National Bank. Inside, you'll find duplicates of all essential documentation, emergency funds, and instructions for worst-case scenarios." As Margaret packed away the completed paperwork, she offered a final warning. "Be vigilant, Mr. Anderson. Enercorp has been pursuing this technology for decades. They have resources, political connections, and legal teams that make them formidable opponents. They will come for you, probably sooner rather than later." Jack looked at Lucas, then back to Thomas and Margaret. "Let them come. We'll be ready." The warning proved prescient. Just 3 days later, Jack and Lucas were working on the cabin's roof when an unmarked drone buzzed overhead, hovering long enough to capture detailed images before speeding away. When Jack reported the incident to Thomas, the old inventor seemed unsurprised. "They're conducting preliminary surveillance," he explained. "Enercorp maintains a global network for detecting unusual energy signatures. Our recent testing would have triggered their attention, and the property transfer would have raised additional flags." The first encounter was subtle, a black SUV driving slowly past the property entrance, its tinted windows revealing nothing about the occupants. 2 days later, a utility van parked at the road junction for hours, ostensibly checking local power lines, but positioned perfectly to observe comings and goings from their property. Then came the digital intrusions. Their internet connection began experiencing unexplained disruptions. Strange emails arrived, containing seemingly innocent attachments that Thomas immediately identified as sophisticated monitoring software. Anonymous phone calls came at odd hours, hanging up when answered. "What's our next move?" Jack asked. Thomas's expression was determined. "We accelerate our timeline. They won't move against us immediately. They'll gather intelligence first, perhaps try legal maneuvers or financial pressure. But we need to establish a defensible position quickly." Over the next 2 weeks, they implemented Thomas's security protocols. Surveillance cameras disguised as natural features were installed around the property perimeter. The laboratory's energy emissions were shielded using specialized equipment. Communication systems were secured with military-grade encryption. Meanwhile, Jack began the process of establishing the Foundation's operational framework. Following Thomas's guidance, he reached out to a carefully vetted list of potential team members, engineers, scientists, and technicians who shared their vision of energy as a human right rather than a commodity. The first to join was Dr. James Wilson, a materials scientist who had collaborated briefly with Thomas in the 1970s before corporate pressure forced them apart. Now retired from university research, Dr. Wilson brought valuable expertise in the specialized components that made Thomas's system so efficient. "I always regretted walking away back then," Dr. Wilson confided to Jack after joining the team. "Corporate pressure was intense. They threatened my funding, my tenure, even my family. Thomas understood why I left, but I've carried the guilt for decades." Elena Vasquez came next, a brilliant young engineer who had spent 5 years developing small-scale renewable energy systems for remote communities in South America. Her practical experience with implementation would be crucial as they moved from prototype to real-world application. "When you've seen children unable to study after sunset because electricity is too expensive," Elena explained during her introduction, "you understand that energy isn't just about convenience. It's about opportunity, about futures being shaped or limited." Robert Chen, a former military electronics specialist with expertise in secure communications and electromagnetic shielding, joined to oversee security operations. His skeptical nature and attention to detail made him perfect for anticipating Enercorp's tactics. "They're already mapping your daily routines," Chen warned after conducting his first security assessment. "They'll identify patterns, vulnerabilities, points of access. We need to become unpredictable while maintaining vigilance." The Foundation's team grew carefully, each new member thoroughly vetted and brought on board only after demonstrating their commitment to the mission. By the end of the first month, they had assembled a core group of 7 experts working from the expanded laboratory facilities. Jack resigned from Brennan's auto repair, explaining to his surprised boss that he had come into an unexpected opportunity. Tom Brennan wished him well, but seemed puzzled by the sudden change. "You sure about this, Jack?" he asked. "You've been through a lot since Maria passed. Big changes aren't always the answer." Jack appreciated the concern, but remained resolute. "This is different, Tom. For the first time since we lost Maria, I feel like I'm doing something that matters, something that would make her proud." Lucas, too, faced a transition as Jack enrolled him in a homeschooling program that would allow them to live full-time at the cabin while continuing his education. The boy adapted quickly, thriving in the environment where learning was directly connected to the Foundation's practical work. The cabin renovation accelerated with Foundation funds. Jack hired local contractors for the basic structural work: new roof, repaired foundation, updated wiring and plumbing, but was careful to maintain the building's rustic appearance. The real improvements happened below ground, where Thomas directed the installation of specialized equipment to shield the laboratory's energy signatures from detection. Their first major technical challenge emerged when they attempted to scale Thomas's prototype for real-world deployment. The laboratory version had been handcrafted with meticulous precision, but a deployable system needed to be robust enough to withstand harsh conditions and simple enough for local technicians to maintain. Elena attacked this problem directly, redesigning the system's interface and creating detailed, illustrated maintenance guides that could be understood even by those with minimal technical training. Dr. Wilson focused on improving component durability, developing weather-resistant casings in simplified connection systems. "The materials are the critical challenge," Dr. Wilson explained during one team meeting. "Thomas's original designs used rare earth elements in specific configurations. We need alternatives that are more widely available without sacrificing efficiency." Jack's mechanical expertise proved invaluable during this process. His years of practical experience as an auto mechanic gave him insights into making complex systems user-friendly and serviceable, considerations that academic engineers sometimes overlooked. "People in remote villages can't call tech support," he reminded the team. "If it breaks and they can't fix it with basic tools and clear instructions, then we've failed." Lucas, too, made surprising contributions. His fresh perspective and natural creativity led to several interface improvements that made the system more intuitive to operate. One evening, after Lucas had gone to bed, Thomas confided in Jack. "That boy has a remarkable mind," he said. "He sees connections that others miss, approaches problems without the constraints of conventional thinking. He reminds me of myself at that age." Jack smiled with pride. He's always been that way. Maria used to say he had an old soul in a young body. As the Foundation's work progressed, So did Enercorp's interest in their activities. Their surveillance became increasingly obvious. Vehicles parked near the property line, drones making regular flyovers, strangers in town asking questions about the new owners of the old Reynolds place. Then came a more direct approach. Jack returned from a supply run to find a sleek black car parked in their clearing and a well-dressed man waiting on the cabin porch. "Mr. Anderson," the man said, extending his hand. "Michael Prescott, Vice President of Research Acquisitions at Enercorp. I hope I'm not intruding." Jack kept his expression neutral as he shook the offered hand. "What can I do for you, Mr. Prescott?" The executive's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'll be direct, Mr. Anderson. Our company has been tracking energy innovations in this region for many years. Our sensors have detected unusual power signatures from this property, signatures consistent with advanced energy amplification technology." Jack maintained his composure. "I'm not sure what you're talking about. We're just fixing up an old cabin." Prescott's smile tightened. "Mr. Anderson, Enercorp is prepared to make a very generous offer for any unusual technology you may have discovered on this property. We specialize in developing and commercializing innovative energy solutions." "Not interested," Jack said flatly. Prescott pulled a business card from his jacket pocket. $5 million, Mr. Anderson. No questions asked. "That's our opening offer for whatever you found here." Jack didn't take the card. "This is private property, Mr. Prescott. I think it's time for you to leave." The executive's pleasant demeanor cooled. "Consider carefully, Mr. Anderson. Enercorp has resources and influence you can't imagine. Working with us would be considerably easier than working against us." After Prescott departed, Jack went immediately to the laboratory, where Thomas and the team had been monitoring the encounter through hidden cameras. $5 million, Dr. Wilson mused. That confirms they don't know exactly what we have. If they did, they'd have offered 10 times that amount. Thomas nodded in agreement. "They're fishing, testing your response. But this marks a new phase. They'll escalate now: legal pressure, regulatory harassment, perhaps more direct intervention." Elena looked concerned. "We should accelerate the Alaska project. Once the technology is deployed and functioning, it becomes much harder for them to suppress." The Alaska project was their first planned implementation, a remote fishing village where electricity costs consume nearly 40% of the average household income due to dependence on diesel generators. The foundation had been working with community leaders to prepare for installing a complete IRES system that would provide clean, reliable power at a fraction of the current cost. "What makes Alaska so strategic?" Jack asked. Thomas spread a map across the conference table. "Several factors. First, extreme conditions. If the system works reliably through an Alaskan winter, it demonstrates robustness. Second, isolation. These communities are perfect examples of those overlooked by conventional energy infrastructure. Third, visibility. Success there will attract attention from similar communities worldwide." The team accelerated preparations, working around the clock to finalize the Alaska prototype while simultaneously strengthening their security measures. The installation team, led by Elena, would depart in 10 days, assuming Enercorp didn't make a more aggressive move before then. The following weeks proved Thomas right about escalation. Strange vehicles appeared near their property at odd hours. Their internet connections suffered unexplained disruptions. Local officials suddenly discovered concerns about their building permits and zoning compliance. The building inspector, who arrived unannounced, was clearly uncomfortable with his assignment. "Look, Mr. Anderson," he confided after completing his inspection, "I got a call from someone high up in the county administration. They wanted me to find violations. Any violations. I'm just doing my job, but something doesn't feel right about this." Jack appreciated the honesty. "I understand you're caught in the middle. We'll address any legitimate concerns you have identified." Most alarmingly, Lucas reported being approached by a friendly stranger while waiting for the school bus, a man who asked casual questions about his father's work in their cabin in the woods. "He seemed really interested in what you do, Dad," Lucas explained. "Asked if you were building anything special at the cabin. I remembered what Mr. Thomas said about keeping secrets, so I just told him you fix cars." "That crosses the line," Jack said furiously. "They're involving a child now." Thomas placed a calming hand on Jack's shoulder. "This is precisely why I developed Protocol Omega. We need to implement it now. Protocol Omega, Thomas explained to the full team, was his ultimate fail-safe, a comprehensive strategy developed over decades to protect his work from corporate or government seizure. It involves simultaneously deploying the technology in multiple locations worldwide, releasing key technical documentation through secure channels to selected universities and nonprofit organizations, and activating a network of supporters in strategic positions. Once Protocol Omega is initiated, the technology can't be contained, Thomas said. It becomes too widespread, too public to suppress. The genie leaves the bottle permanently. Jack was initially skeptical. Can we really deploy that many systems that quickly? We've barely finished the Alaska prototype. Thomas smiled. I've been preparing for this day for 40 years, Jack. The Foundation's $5 million isn't just sitting in bank accounts. I've established fabrication facilities, training programs, and implementation partnerships in 12 countries. They've been manufacturing components and training technicians for years, waiting for the activation signal. He pulled up a secure database on the laboratory's main computer, revealing a global network of collaborators, small manufacturing facilities disguised as conventional electronics shops, training programs embedded within local technical schools, community partners in strategic locations across 6 continents. The display showed 20 locations where systems were already prepositioned, awaiting only final assembly and activation. The communities range from fishing villages in Alaska to tribal areas in Africa, mountain settlements in the Andes to island communities in Southeast Asia. All these years, Thomas explained, I've been identifying the perfect demonstration sites, places where the need is greatest, where conventional energy infrastructure has failed or never arrived, where success would be most visible. The team worked around the clock, finalizing preparations. The Alaska prototype was completed and shipped with Elena to oversee installation. Similar systems were dispatched to rural communities in Maine, Appalachia, in the Southwest, as well as to villages in Africa, Asia, and South America. Technical documentation was prepared in multiple languages, with simplified manuals for local technicians and more detailed materials for engineering schools and research institutions. These would be released simultaneously through secure channels once the systems were operational. As they neared readiness, Enercorp's pressure tactics intensified. Legal notices arrived alleging patent infringement. Tax authorities suddenly discovered irregularities in the Foundation's filings. Even their utilities began experiencing mysterious disruptions. Robert Chen discovered sophisticated surveillance devices around the property perimeter and evidence of attempted cyber intrusions into their secure network. Most concerning of all, he identified what appeared to be preparations for a more direct approach. Enercorp security personnel conducting reconnaissance of the property from concealed positions in the surrounding forest. They're planning something significant, Chen warned after one perimeter sweep. Professional equipment, military-style deployment pattern. This isn't corporate espionage anymore. It's an operation. The breaking point came when Jack discovered clear evidence of intrusion at the laboratory entrance. Subtle but unmistakable signs that someone had attempted to breach their security during the night. That evening, Thomas gathered the entire team for a critical decision. We have 2 choices, he said gravely. We can continue trying to operate under this increasing pressure, or we can launch Protocol Omega immediately before we're fully prepared. Neither option is ideal, but I believe we've run out of time. Dr. Wilson spoke first. The core technology is ready. We've confirmed functionality in all test scenarios. What we lack is the support infrastructure, comprehensive training materials, maintenance protocols, implementation guidelines. Elena, joining via secure video link from Alaska, reported that their first installation was nearly complete and functioning within expected parameters. The villagers here already understand the basics of operation and maintenance, she said. They're quick learners, especially when it means cutting their energy costs by 70%. Jack considered all perspectives carefully. As Foundation Director, the final decision was his to make. We launch Protocol Omega, he decided. Better to move forward with what we have than risk losing everything to Enercorp. The next 72 hours were a carefully orchestrated whirlwind of activity. The activation signal went out to implementation teams worldwide. Technical documentation was transmitted to selected recipients in academia and nonprofit energy organizations. A strategic press release was prepared, revealing the existence of the technology without disclosing the critical details that would allow replication without proper oversight. Thomas worked the secure communication system tirelessly, contacting partners he hadn't spoken with in years, professors at engineering schools who had quietly incorporated his principles into their teaching, community organizers who had prepared their villages for eventual installation, former colleagues who had maintained discrete fabrication capabilities. Jack coordinated the final assembly teams, ensuring each deployment site received the necessary components and expertise. Dr. Wilson supervised the preparation of technical documentation, striking the delicate balance between providing enough information for legitimate implementation while protecting against weaponization or monopolization. Lucas helped wherever he could, organizing shipments, preparing instructional diagrams, even creating simple animated tutorials that could transcend language barriers for maintenance procedures. The activation countdown reached its final hours. Reports from field teams confirmed readiness at 18 of the 20 deployment sites. The remaining 2 had encountered logistical challenges, but expected to be operational within days. Then, as they reached the 24-hour mark before simultaneous activation, Jack received an alert from their perimeter security system. Vehicles were approaching, multiple black SUVs moving with purposeful speed. Within minutes, the clearing in front of the cabin filled with Enercorp security personnel and what appeared to be federal agents. A helicopter circled overhead, its downdraft bending the treetops. From the lead vehicle emerged a woman in an impeccable business suit, Victoria Harlow, CEO of Enercorp herself. She approached the cabin with the confident stride of someone accustomed to getting what she wanted. Jack met her at the porch steps, his earlier anxiety replaced by a calm determination. "Mr. Anderson," Harlow began without preamble, "I have a federal warrant authorizing the seizure of unauthorized energy technology from these premises. Please step aside." Jack didn't move. "On what grounds?" Harlow's smile was cold. "National security concerns regarding unregulated power generation technology. The warrant covers all equipment, documentation, and prototypes developed by Thomas Reynolds or derived from his work." She handed him an official-looking document, which Jack examined carefully before speaking. "Ms. Harlow, I think you'll find your timing extremely unfortunate." He gestured to Lucas, who stood in the cabin doorway holding a tablet. "Would you like to see what's happening right now in Alaska? Or perhaps in rural Kenya? Maybe the village in Peru would interest you more?" Lucas turned the tablet to display a live stream showing the activation of an IREAS unit in a remote Alaskan community. Local residents gathered around as the system powered up, bringing light to homes that had struggled with expensive, unreliable electricity for generations. Similar scenes played out in locations across the globe, all happening simultaneously, all being documented by local media and international observers. "What is this?" Harlow demanded, her composure slipping. "We call it Protocol Omega," came Thomas's voice as he emerged from the cabin to stand beside Jack and Lucas. "The simultaneous worldwide deployment of the integrated renewable energy amplification system. At this moment, 18 functional units are coming online in communities across 6 continents." Harlow's face paled. "You're bluffing. You couldn't possibly have deployed so many systems so quickly." Thomas smiled. "I've been preparing for this day for 40 years, Ms. Harlow. While you were focused on acquiring the technology, I was focused on sharing it with those who need it most." He gestured to one of the federal agents. "I believe if you check the news, you'll find that the technology you're seeking under national security concerns is now being publicly demonstrated worldwide. It can hardly be classified as secret when communities from Alaska to Zimbabwe are using it openly." The agent consulted his phone, scrolling through breaking news stories with growing concern. "Ms. Harlow," he said quietly, "there are reports coming in from multiple sources. The technology appears to be widely deployed already. The warrant specifies unregistered, classified technology," a second agent added. "If this system is already in public use internationally—" Victoria Harlow's carefully composed demeanor cracked. "This isn't over, Reynolds. Enercorp will still find a way to control this market." Thomas shook his head. "There is no market to control, Ms. Harlow. That's what your corporation never understood. The IREAS technology isn't a product to sell, it's a resource to share. The Foundation's charter ensures it remains open source, available to anyone who needs it, protected only from weaponization and monopolization. He gestured toward Jack and Lucas. And now it has guardians who will carry that mission forward long after I'm gone. The federal agents, confronted with the public nature of the technology and growing uncertain about the legitimacy of their warrant, ultimately departed without conducting a search. Victoria Harlow left with them, her defeat evident in every rigid line of her posture. As the dust settled from Protocol Omega's implementation, the Reynolds Foundation entered a new phase. With the technology now public, their focus shifted to education, implementation support, and continued refinement of the systems. Reports began flowing in from the deployment sites. In Alaska, the fishing village saw immediate energy cost reductions of over 70%, with the IRES system functioning perfectly despite harsh weather conditions. In Kenya, a community that had never had reliable electricity now powered its school and medical clinic around the clock. In Peru, a remote mountain village finally had consistent energy for refrigeration and communication systems. The global response was immediate and overwhelming. News organizations covered the story as a technological breakthrough. Communities similar to those in the initial deployment began reaching out to the Foundation, seeking their own IRES installations. Universities requested more detailed technical information for research and educational purposes. Enercorp, meanwhile, faced a corporate crisis. Their stock value plummeted as investors recognized that their business model, based on controlling and commodifying energy, was fundamentally threatened by the widespread availability of Thomas's technology. Victoria Harlow resigned under pressure, and the company began a desperate pivot toward adapting rather than opposing the new energy paradigm. 3 months after the confrontation, Jack found himself testifying before a congressional committee on renewable energy policy. The Foundation's work had gained such prominence that policymakers were being forced to reconsider regulatory frameworks that had long favored traditional energy corporations. The transition won't happen overnight, Jack explained to the committee. Conventional energy systems will remain necessary for decades. But the IRES technology offers an alternative path, one that empowers communities rather than making them dependent on centralized power generation and distribution. When questioned about the economic impact on the existing energy sector, Jack was straightforward. Change is inevitable and sometimes painful. But the fossil fuel industry has had a century to prepare for this transition. The IRES technology simply accelerates a process that climate reality was already forcing. Back at the cabin, the Foundation's work continued at an accelerating pace. The original team of 7 had grown to 30 full-time staff, coordinating projects on every continent. The modest laboratory beneath the shed had expanded into a comprehensive research and development facility, though still carefully disguised to maintain the property's unassuming appearance. Thomas, now approaching his 88th birthday, had stepped back from day-to-day operations but remained active as an advisor and mentor. His relationship with Lucas had deepened into a grandfatherly bond, the old inventor delighting in the boy's quick mind and creative approaches to technical problems. 1 year after Jack's desperate bid at the county auction, he stood on the porch of their fully restored cabin, watching Lucas help Thomas adjust one of the discrete solar collectors integrated into the roof design. The property had been transformed, not into a showcase of wealth, but into a working demonstration of sustainable living. Dr. Wilson joined Jack on the porch, handing him a steaming mug of coffee. "Have you seen the news?" he asked. Enercorp has announced a new division focused on IRES-compatible storage systems. If you can't beat them, join them, I suppose. Jack nodded. They'll adapt. The transition will take decades, and there's still plenty of profit in supporting and enhancing these systems rather than controlling them. Wilson smiled. "You've accomplished something remarkable here, Jack. In just 1 year, you've gone from struggling to pay rent to changing the global energy landscape." Jack shook his head. "I just happened to be the right person in the right place. Thomas did the hard work, decades of research, development, planning." "Perhaps," Wilson acknowledged, "but it took your particular combination of practical skills and ethical compass to actually implement his vision. Don't underestimate what you've contributed." They watched as Lucas excitedly showed Thomas a modification he'd designed for the monitoring system, a simplified interface that would make maintenance easier for non-technical users. The boy had thrived in the midst of the foundation's work, his natural creativity finding perfect expression in solving practical problems. "He's going to surpass both of us someday," Thomas had told Jack recently. "He has your mechanical intuition and my theoretical curiosity without either of our limitations." As the sun set over their property, Jack reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a desperate 100 bid at a county auction. They had found not just a home, but a purpose, a way to honor Maria's memory by making a genuine difference in the world. The cabin that had once seemed like a broken-down last resort had become the headquarters for a quiet revolution in energy accessibility. The foundation's work would continue for generations, guided by the principles Thomas had established and the practical approach Jack had implemented. Lucas joined his father on the porch, his face flushed with excitement. "Dad, the Alaska team just reported that 3 neighboring villages want to install systems before winter. They saw how well ours worked through last year's storms." "Can we go help?" Jack smiled, putting his arm around his son's shoulders. "I think that could be arranged. It would be good to see it firsthand, wouldn't it?" Thomas joined them, moving more slowly these days, but still sharp of mind and purpose. "The first installation is always the hardest," he said. "Once people see the system working, see their neighbors with reliable, affordable power, the technology sells itself, or rather, shares itself." The 3 of them stood together as twilight deepened, their cabin glowing with light powered by the very technology they were sharing with the world. Proof that even the most broken places could be transformed with the right combination of vision, skill, and heart. In the distance, the lights of the nearest town twinkled like earthbound stars. Soon Jack knew those lights would be powered by the same technology illuminating their cabin, not because it was mandated or marketed, but because it simply made more sense for communities to generate clean, affordable energy than to remain dependent on costly, polluting alternatives. The revolution they had launched wouldn't make headlines every day. It would spread quietly, from village to village, community to community, as people recognized the practical benefits of energy independence. And it had all begun with a father's desperate attempt to provide his son with a home, a broken cabin purchased for $100 that turned out to contain a $5 million legacy and the potential to change the world. As Lucas chattered excitedly about their upcoming Alaska trip, Jack caught Thomas's eye. The old inventor nodded slightly, a gesture of satisfaction and approval. They had done it, protected his life's work, and ensured it would benefit those who needed it most. The cabin had indeed held treasure beyond imagination. But the greatest treasure had been the opportunity to transform their own broken lives into something that could help repair brokenness in the wider world. 5 years after Protocol Omega, the legacy cabin stood as a living testament to the power of innovation guided by conscience. What had begun as a desperate purchase had evolved into the heart of a global movement, transforming energy access for millions. But for Jack, Lucas, and Thomas, the journey continued to unfold in ways none could have predicted. On a crisp autumn morning, much like the day they'd first discovered the cabin, a sleek private jet touched down at the small regional airport nearest their property. From it emerged representatives from the United Nations Sustainable Development Council, come to witness firsthand the technology that had begun reshaping energy infrastructure in over 60 countries. Jack greeted them at the cabin, now the centerpiece of a modest campus of research buildings and training facilities, all designed to blend harmoniously with the surrounding forest. Thomas's philosophy of unobtrusive development had guided every expansion, ensuring their growing operation remained true to its roots. The UN delegation included energy ministers from developing nations, technical advisors, and humanitarian coordinators. As Jack led them through the facilities, he couldn't help reflecting on how far they'd come. The Reynolds Foundation now employed over 200 people worldwide, coordinated thousands of installations annually, and had training centers on 4 continents. Most remarkable was that each community that received an IRES system became not just a beneficiary but a partner. Local residents trained to maintain their systems would then help neighboring communities implement their own. The technology spread organically, a self-replicating ecosystem of energy independence. In the main conference room, once Thomas's underground laboratory, Lucas, now 14, was presenting his latest innovation to the Foundation's engineering team. Over the past 5 years, The boy's natural talent had blossomed under Thomas's mentorship. He had redesigned the iris interface to be even more intuitive, developed simplified maintenance protocols, and most recently, created a diagnostic system that could be operated by anyone with minimal training. The UN delegates watched in amazement as the teenager confidently explained complex technical concepts, answering their questions with the ease of someone who had lived and breathed this technology for years. Jack felt a surge of pride watching his son, no longer the quiet, careful child protecting his father from disappointment, but a confident young man growing into his own unique potential. Thomas, now in his 90s but still remarkably sharp, joined them for the afternoon session. Though he moved more slowly and relied on a walking stick, his mind remained as agile as ever. The old inventor had lived to see his life's work spread across the globe, transforming countless lives just as he had envisioned decades earlier when he'd first begun hiding his discoveries around the property. After the formal presentations, as the delegates toured the practical demonstrations, Thomas pulled Jack aside. "Did you see the news from Enercorp this morning?" he asked, his voice quieter, but still carrying that characteristic mix of intellect and mischief. Jack nodded. After years of fighting against the IRES technology, Enercorp had finally announced the complete restructuring of its business model. No longer focused on controlling energy production and distribution, the corporation was repositioning itself as a facilitator of energy independence, offering support services and enhancements for community-based systems like those developed by the Reynolds Foundation. Victoria Harlow's replacement as CEO had publicly acknowledged that the centralized energy model was becoming obsolete in a world where communities could generate and manage their own clean power. It was the corporate equivalent of surrendering to the inevitable. "They didn't beat us, so they're finally joining this," Jack observed. Thomas smiled. They had no choice. The economics became undeniable. When villages in Africa and South America started producing surplus energy that they could share with neighboring communities, the writing was on the wall. You can't monopolize what people can create for themselves. That evening, after the delegation had departed, the three generations of the Reynolds Foundation's leadership gathered on the cabin porch, the same porch where Jack and Lucas had first opened the strong box containing Thomas's map 5 years earlier. Wilson joined them, bringing a bottle of champagne to celebrate the UN's commitment to fund 10,000 new IRES installations in regions suffering from energy poverty. Elena arrived from the airport, fresh from overseeing the Foundation's first large-scale urban implementation in Southeast Asia. The core team that had launched Protocol Omega was reunited, older and wiser but still driven by the same vision. As twilight settled over the clearing, Lucas raised an unexpected question. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if someone else had bought this cabin?" he asked. "If Dad hadn't been at that auction that day?" Thomas looked at the young man thoughtfully. "I've asked myself that many times over the years. Was it chance that brought your father to that auction? Or something more deliberate? I'd been watching the property for years, waiting for the right person to appear. I saw many potential buyers come and go, people with far more resources than your father, but none with the right combination of character and capability." Jack smiled, remembering the desperate man he'd been 5 years ago, willing to risk his last dollars on a broken-down cabin because he couldn't bear to see the hope fade from his son's eyes again. "I was just trying to give Lucas a home," he said simply. "Everything else, the technology, the foundation, the global impact, that all came later." "Maybe that's exactly why it worked," Elena suggested. "You weren't looking for treasure or power or recognition. You just wanted to build something meaningful for your son." Thomas nodded. The world is full of brilliant minds creating extraordinary technology. But without the right guidance, that brilliance often serves the wrong purposes. Profit over people, control over liberation, complexity over accessibility. What this technology needed wasn't just development, but direction, a moral compass to ensure it served those who needed it most. He placed a hand on Lucas's shoulder. "And now it has not just one generation of guardians, but two. Whatever happens next, the work will continue." As darkness fell, the lights of their cabin glowed warmly against the forest backdrop. But they were no longer alone in the night. Across the valley, other lights twinkled. The town had adopted IRES technology the previous year, joining the growing network of communities powered by Thomas's innovation. And beyond that town, Across countries and continents, thousands of similar lights were shining. Schools where children could study after sunset, clinics where medicines could be refrigerated, workshops where local economies were growing, homes where families gathered in comfort regardless of their economic status or geographic isolation. The legacy cabin had indeed held treasure beyond imagining. But its true value had never been in the technology itself or even in the foundation's impressive resources. The real treasure had been the chance to transform broken things, a dilapidated cabin, a struggling family, a flawed energy system, into something whole again. As Jack looked at his son, animated in conversation with Thomas about his latest ideas, he thought of Maria. She would have loved seeing Lucas like this, confident, purposeful, his natural creativity finding expression in work that helped others. The journey that had begun with her wedding ring as collateral had become a living memorial to the values she had embodied, finding joy in simple things, seeing possibilities where others saw only problems, and always helping when you had the chance. The cabin that had once stood abandoned in a forest clearing had become a beacon, its light spreading across the world. And it had all begun with the simplest of human impulses, a father's desperate wish to give his child a place to call home.